Greetings, friends and followers. This is Nurses Talking. I am Del Barzi. As always, if you like what you see and hear, subscribe. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Here on Nurses Talking, we speak to nurses anywhere in the world and at any stage in their nursing journey. Today, I have the very great pleasure of welcoming Corey Roman out of North Carolina. Corey is a nurse, an advanced practice registered nurse. She's a certified holistic health and wellness coach. She's a nurse consultant. She's a speaker. She's a published author. She is an entrepreneur. She's got Healing Waters Holistic Mental Wellness. Um, and as I read about Corey, she's a powerhouse. So welcome, Corey.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you for doing this. And firstly, my first question always is why? Why are people nurses? So what brought you to nursing?
Yeah, so interesting enough, when I was younger, my dream was to never be a nurse. It was actually to be a doctor. And then as I began to, in high school, like go through my allied health classes, I said, I don't know if I want to go to med school. I don't know if I want to do that much time, have that much debt. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to do nursing. And so at that point, you could get your CNA while you were in high school. So
Mhm.
I was able to get that prior to going off to college. And so it kind of happened by happenstance of, I don't think I want to be a doctor now. I think I'm just going to go. And I don't want to say just be a nurse because a lot of people say that, like I'm just a
Yeah.
nurse, because I think nurses have their own superpower. But that's what kind of led me to nursing at that point.
Mhm, mhm. And so you adjusted your thinking a little bit. Um, did you have any references? Were there any family members or anything who were nurses?
No, but interesting enough, my grandmother, talking to her, she's passed away now, but that's something that she wanted to do when she was younger. And I never knew that. And so it
Mm,
wasn't until after I became a nurse that she was like, yeah, that's something that I had always wanted to do. But I think for me personally, like I've always been interested in science, and it was actually a subject I did pretty well in. And so that's what kind of made me want to get into the medical field. But like I don't have any other nurses in my family, oddly enough.
so how did it challenge you?
You said, how did it challenge me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, um, first of all, nursing school in itself, what was a challenge, and some people they struggle with the belief of, okay, yeah, you were accepted to college, but now you have to apply to a different school. And so they're like, but you're already in school. Yeah, I was admitted to the college, but now I have to get into the nursing program.
Good grab. Yeah.
So like that was like the initial challenge, and it made me so nervous. But back when I was in high school and I started going to the facilities to be able to obtain my CNA, I liked the work that I did. I enjoyed bringing smiles to the residents' faces, because in facilities sometimes they don't have family that visit,
Mm-hmm.
so the
Mm-hmm.
staff becomes family. But that was at a young age. I mean, you got to think when you're in high school, 16, 17, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're learning to be, a caregiver, a caretaker. So that's where the initial challenge started. And, you know, trying to remember all these things and all these abbreviations, I was like, how do people do this? But then the more that I studied and, got with other individuals and I learned my way of learning, then it was a lot better. Because it was at that point that I learned we don't all learn the same, and some of
Right.
us need things different. And so
Yeah.
I was one of those people that needed things explained a little bit differently, to
Mm-hmm.
comprehend and to understand. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where the initial challenge
It's
started.
interesting you mentioned the abbreviations because that made me smile because that's so true. Because we can say a whole sentence. In fact, we can almost write a paragraph in just abbreviations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm. So once you became a nurse, where'd you work? What kind of areas did you work? What did you gravitate to?
Yeah, so I wanted to do ICU and I don't want to say back in those days because in my mind I'm not that old. But back then, that was kind of like unheard of. They were like
Mm.
new grads in the ICU, like you need to go to
Mm.
med surg. And I was like, I don't want to do med surg. I want to do ICU. And so that's where I started. And I did adult ICU for about a year and a half. And then I said, I want to try the NICU. So I did the NICU. I stayed there for almost a year. At that time, I did not have kids. And so when I lost my first patient, I took that really, really rough. Um, and so I did that for about a year. And then I decided that I wanted to go back and get my master's degree. And I knew that working third shift, commuting 45 minutes was not going to be conducive
Mm-hmm.
going back to school. So at that point, I decided to do public health. And so I went to work at the health department. And I stayed there for a couple years. And then I wanted to do more community health. So then I did home health care. And that's a different experience in itself, right? Because in the
Yes.
hospital, you have somebody beside you, you can ask questions to, you can say, hey, come here, look at this, what you think. In the home, that is different. You don't have that extra support. So it challenged me to really dig deep and learn more, but it also challenged me to get creative
Mm-hmm.
because depending on the home you're in, you don't have all the same resources available in that home. So you're going out to rural areas and at that point that's when I learned like not everybody lives the same either. And so you still have to bring that compassion and empathy to any situation, but then you have to get used to things that would surprise you, like when you walk in and the patient has a ferret as a pet or the dog's on the bed and you need to do a dressing change. It's like, yikes, what am I going to do, especially if it's a sterile dressing change, right? And so I learned that's where I learned most to adapt. And I think for me, that's where a lot of my critical thinking came into place.
Yeah.
And then from there, I started doing things that I said, oh, I don't never want to do that. And that's what led me to hospice. And so I was a hospice educator, and that was probably my longest career path was as a hospice educator. And the question I got asked was, how can you be a hospice educator if you never worked in hospice? And I said, that is a really good question.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was like a big learning curve for me, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. But if you would have told me back in college, you are going to be a hospice nurse, I would have told you absolutely not. That is not something that I want to do. And so that's what kind of like led me there. And then lastly, whenever COVID happened, at that time, I was doing management for a company that had a contract with the state. So I've also done
Mm-hmm.
management as a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point where I was just like, mental health is imperative. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's happening right now, but even
Mm-hmm.
even myself, I was like, I'm not used to this. I got working from home, my daughter's here, I'm trying to help her do homework and then also work. And I felt like for a minute there, I myself had a little bit of a breakdown. I said, I can't
Yeah.
do this. And so it was at that point that I decided that mental health was going to be my focus. But if you would have told me back in high school, you're going to be a mental health nerd, I would have told you absolutely not. And I know this sounds terrible, but I had this thing, I don't do crazy people. But then when I became a nurse, I realized you're going to do that anyway. You do psych every day.
Every day, yes. That
So
is
now
an
that I
awareness that takes a little while for it to assimilate. Like, wait a minute.
when you start seeing family dynamics come into place and you start seeing behaviors, you're like, wait a minute, I've been dealing with this since day
Yeah.
one. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I can do this. I can really do this.
Yeah, I can do this. I can do this. This is the path we walk.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So right here, I want to jump in and ask you about something we were talking about prior to coming on, because I wanted to ask you about, you said you had a near fatal experience, and I really want to know how that shaped you. So can you tell me about it?
Yeah, and so that shaped me as an individual first, but it also definitely shaped my nursing career. So I was in a terrible accident in 2004, and it's a blessing that I don't remember all the details behind what happened. I just know after I came to, there was ambulance surrounding the car. They had to cut the top off the car to get us out of the car. And that happened on like July 3rd, right? And so I don't remember anything else until July 5th. And that's when I woke up in the ICU, intubated,
Mhm.
traction, because I had an open fracture. And so that's where I really learned where empathy and compassion is imperative, but also advocacy, because there was one time where I was in the ICU and just had nausea, just felt awful, really. And so I already had tubes from my stomach, a G and a J tube. And so the nurse called the doctor and she's like, yeah, she's very nauseous, not feeling well. So she asked to drop an NG tube.
Yeah.
Now I'm new to nursing, but I'm like, well, wait a minute. If there's two tubes already out of my stomach, why do we need to drop
Yes.
an NG tube? I said, this doesn't make sense. So they did it, very, very painful experience. And when the doctor came by later that day, he said, why do you have that? Why didn't they just, leave the bag open to
Mhm.
gravity, whatever? And I was like, your guess is good as mine. Like, I thought the same thing. And so it was at that point that I said, you have to advocate for yourself too.
Mhm.
If it doesn't feel right, say no. And then there was also an experience that I had where a nurse came into my room, and thankfully I was alert and oriented. But they said, Miss Roman, here's your meds. And I was like, well, what is that? And when they listed off what it was, I was like, I don't take that. Those are not my meds. And so I while I really honor the profession of nursing, I tell all families, if you can have somebody in the hospital, I would highly recommend that you have them present, just because we're all human, accidents happen, right? And so that challenged me to double and triple check. And when a patient says that's not right, you listen,
You listen. Mhm.
you go back and verify, because it could just be an honest mistake, right? But yeah, that's where it taught me what to do and then what not to do by being a patient first. And so the article that came from that was titled On the Other Side of the Bed.
Mhm.
And so that was my experience as a patient. Um, and so
Yeah.
it just really shaped my nursing career after that.
What do you think you'd like to see change about nursing, if anything?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would like to see change about nursing is that it becomes more inclusive, right? And so I know in life in general, we don't all have an equal playing field, right? But when you look at the nursing profession and you look at individuals that it's a second career, or, they've been stay-at-home parents,
Mm.
entering the workforce again, it's not always equal. And then sometimes, because it's not, you miss out on really, really good nurses because
Mhm.
of those barriers that's put into place. So I would like it to be a more inclusive profession where we try to find ways to break barriers and be okay with thinking outside the box, right? And not being so rigid. And I
Yeah.
say that because even after my car accident, I wanted to go back to school. And I had one professor that was like, why don't you just take the semester off? And while I think she was coming from a place of concern, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I had to do. So luckily for me, I had an instructor that was like, why didn't you say something sooner? If that's what you want to do, even if you have to go to clinical in a wheelchair, we will help you get around, because we knew that it wasn't going to be long term. But
Mhm.
she like advocated for me. She fought for me. She thought outside the box. And it was because of her that I was able to graduate with my class on time, even after having that bad car accident. So I want to see nursing to a point where we're not so rigid, and we meet nurses where they are, because we could be passing up on great nurses for the simple
Yes.
fact of you don't check a box. You can't
Yes.
do this. It's
Yeah.
like, we got to be better than that. And so
Yeah.
that's what I would like to see it changed about nursing.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. And particularly, here we are in 2025, and nursing is has blown up. I mean, there's so many areas in which you can serve and work that there is no need at all for it for a barrier because there's a niche for everyone.
Absolutely.
So there's no need. So absolutely, I agree with you. What would you say is your greatest achievement so far?
When I came out of nursing school, I thought I knew what I wanted to do, and I did it, but to be open to challenges. So I said I didn't want to be a hospice nurse, but I did it. I got through it. I said I didn't want to do psych and mental health, but I did it. And not only did I do it, but I did it as an advanced practice nurse with no experience as a psych nurse. I would say getting out of that imposter syndrome was probably the best thing, that the biggest accomplishment professionally that I've done, because we
Mhm.
get wrapped up into this, well, I don't have this background and I don't have that,
Yes,
and we come up
yes.
with so many excuses as to why we can't, when at the end of the day the only person that's challenging you is the one in the mirror. So getting out of my own head and getting out of my comfort zone was probably my greatest achievements as a nurse.
Yeah. And that is huge. That is huge. I think I'm going to put that quote somewhere. Well, that is really huge because we do have a problem with that. And I can see why. I really can see why. But we always feel we need to get this other certification and that other certification and before we can make a step. Not necessarily true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
experience is also key, but like you said, people get wrapped up in this degree, this certification, that certification. I just tell people, you just really have to find what you're passionate about and what
Mhm.
doesn't feel like work to you.
Yeah.
And that's something that you'll really enjoy, you know, for the remainder of your nursing career.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll do it because you love it and you learn about it because you love it and you'll get the certification because you love it.
Exactly. Instead of again trying to check a box, right?
Yeah. So you're an entrepreneur.
I
You
am.
have what is that? You have Healing Waters, holistic mental wellness.
Yeah,
Healing
absolutely.
Waters. Where that name come from?
So interesting enough, so my first business is Special Touch Holistic Care and
Hmm.
Educational Services. And so that was an educational services that came about where I do teaching and training in the community, right?
Hmm.
CPR, medication classes, things like that. So then when I became a psych and mental health nurse practitioner, I needed to shift my focus. I still do education too, but Healing Waters came about because whenever you think about it, water is pure, water cleanses, it heals. We need it. It's a part of everyday life. You know, we have to consume it. And so that's the thought behind Healing Waters, is to bring healing to those individuals who may be suffering from a mental illness. And we do it from a holistic approach. So I'm not just focused on the illness, the disease process itself. I'm focused on the whole person because that plays a part into a person's mental health. And I think a lot of times patients get looked at as this person has depression, right? And then that's the only thing that they treat, but then they never take the time to really understand this individual to see what other parts play into that diagnosis. So
Yeah.
that's how Healing Waters came about.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. I love the name. I love the name. And you talked about it being, water being so important. And I have to tell you that water is my go-to place. I mean, I have always said I cannot live anywhere that's landlocked. I have to be able to see water. If I'm close to water, I'm good. I'm good.
And I'm the same way. And I tell people that I'm like, the beach is my happy place. You know, I like to go out and do yoga on the beach whenever I do go to the beach. And it's something about the waves that's just very calming to me. And so I practice exercises such as like when the tide goes back in, that's me releasing whatever
Yeah, yeah.
negativity, negative energy, like letting that float back
Let it go.
out. And so, yeah,
Hmm.
water has always been healing to me as well.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What advice do you think you'd give someone who wants to be a nurse?
Yes. So the advice to up and coming nurses, for one, I would say know your why, know why you want to do this, because every day is not going to be a great day. It's not going to feel like a rewarding day. So you have to go back to your why. And that's what's going to keep you motivated, and it's going to help you keep going when the times get tough. Because one thing I guarantee you is that the times will get tough. It's just part of the process, right? And then also, another piece of advice would be okay with saying no, because while nursing is rewarding, it's also a sacrifice that you make too. Trying to get through the program in itself
Yeah.
is a sacrifice. And so there will be a short time, if you can endure it, where you might say no to a lot of things because you do have to study. You do have a paper, a project, and prioritizing is of the utmost importance, right? And so as nurses, we get so involved in helping others. We don't do enough for ourselves. So part of that is to start off with a good self-care regimen early on. That's why people are getting burnt out so fast. They don't do self-care, and then they get caregiver burnout. So back to your original question, it would be to also practice self-care early on while you're in nursing school. So therefore, when you get out into practice, you have a good foundation. So those would be the things that I would impart to new and upcoming nurses.
Well, I'm glad you brought up self-care because that was going to be my next question is what do you do to care for you? You do
Yes.
so much. I look at this, you do so much. What do you do to care for you?
So my go-to, I love going to the spa. I don't get to go often enough, but if I could have a spa day, that's my go-to. If going to travel, going on trips, I love to do those things, having family functions. But I know that that's not something that I can do every single week. So if I can just steal 30 minutes here, sit back, meditate, go to the gym, sit in the sauna, just those little things make a big impact too. So those are what I use. I'm involved in church. So my Sundays, I try to reserve spiritual, but then also like filling my own cup up, relaxing, watching TV if that's what I choose to do, but just taking little moments out for myself. Because I whenever I do my conferences, self-care and wellness conference, I have everybody always pull out their phone and I say, tell me what percentage your battery is on. 100, 70, 30. And I said, okay, so at what point do you start to get nervous and you say, hey, I need to charge my phone? It's kind of, so it varies. It's like, oh, 90%. I'm like, wow, 90? You start to get worried? Okay.
Yeah.
Some people are like, when it's dead, that's when I'll worry about charging it. And I'm like, wow, you're such a risk taker. But the reason why I do that is because I tell them we get so involved in these things that for me cause a lot of anxiety every time it buzzes or rings. So we get
Hmm.
so involved with charging this. But then our everyday lives, we don't treat the same way we treat our phone. We don't plug in and recharge, and we just think we can just keep on going, just go.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
going into the batteries empty. And I'm like, that is the quickest way to burn out. And that is the quickest way to end up in a grave when you are not taking care of yourself. So
Indeed.
I'm like, treat yourself like you treat that phone that causes so much anxiety. Plug in and recharge.
So, Corey, that's a very good one. I think I'm going to steal it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sorry. That's a very good one. I have
Yeah.
I have one last question. I have been collecting these words. I started asking people, um, if you could, because sometimes people tell me, other people said you will make a good nurse, and I want to know what did they see in you that made you say that, made them say that. So if you could tell me what you think of as what you would say is the most essential quality of a nurse, if you can tell me that in one word, what would that word be?
I would use the word compassion.
Compassion. Mhm. Yeah, that comes up. That comes up quite a bit. That comes up quite a bit. And I have to say that it has come up so often that it made me start to think that we know this, and we walk in compassion every time we go to work. Except very often that compassion doesn't seem to be extended to ourselves, to our colleagues, to the we extend all the compassion that we can, and it's like we use it all up on our patients.
Yeah.
But when it comes to
Yes.
ourselves and our colleagues, we're like, what compassion?
Yeah, we don't have any more to give. And so that's where it comes like trying to pour from an empty cup. And
Yes.
that's why the self-care is important because if you don't fill up that cup, it's not going to refill up itself, right? Like it's kind of like you have to make deposits into yourself. And
Yes.
that's just like home and family life, right? We give so much to our patients. We come home, it's like I don't want to deal with this. I am tired. And so I think that's the key though, having
Mhm.
compassion for yourself
Mhm.
and then giving yourself grace, just like you give other people grace all the time,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then also just practicing that self-care because a lot of times it comes off on the people that we love and respect. We and they feel like, oh, I don't want to bother them today. They're kind of
Yeah.
grouchy. And it's because we expand and extend so much compassion and grace to our patients. And so
Yeah.
that's where that balance comes in at, right?
Yeah.
Um, and while compassion is important to connect with patients and to meet them where they are, it's true for yourself too. That's
It's
how
very
you connect with other people.
yeah.
And so just giving each other, there's so much tension between nurses and new grads and mentors. And it's like, you guys, we got to do better. Like, we're better than this. And so just being more welcoming to new grads and taking them under our wing. And then I'm going to share this story,
Mhm.
which is part about compassion too. But I did have a preceptor once. And I was in the ICU and I said, the patient's blood pressure is this. And I have this medication for the blood pressure. Like, what do you think? And her response to me was, well, go in there and do it and see what happens. Huh? So then I'm looking at her like, you're playing, right? Like you're not serious. Like I'm coming to you with a serious
I'm asking you
question.
a serious question.
Yeah. And it's things like that that intimidates new nurses. And you like don't know if they're picking on you or just pushing your
Mm-hmm.
buttons to see what you're gonna do. And then you do it, and then it's like, oh, you shouldn't have did that. That was
Mm-hmm.
bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, you don't learn from mistakes that involves people's lives either.
Right.
that's not
Right.
good. But it's those things where we kind of like tear at each other, and then we don't have good working relationships with our colleagues for that reason.
Yeah.
And so just as a profession, we have to do better. We to me, we owe each other that much to be better and to do better, right?
Yeah.
And not this, eating your young, which has been going on for a long period of time. So just offering that compassion to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely essential because it is actually doing the patients that we want to care for and the patients that we extend all this compassion to. When we don't take care of ourselves, when we don't extend compassion to ourselves and to our colleagues, we're actually doing those very same patients a disservice because we can't we think we're taking care of them properly, but we're not. You can't.
Absolutely. We're not. We're not. And when you're burnt out, it's like everybody gets that syndrome. If one more patient does X, Y, and Z, like I'm going to lose it. And it's like that's the time where it's time to go take a break and take some deep breaths because we're going off the deep end here.
One more time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like you push that call bell one more time. And so it was funny because working in the ICU, I had my own little thoughts. And I'm like, when they start pushing that call bell, it's time to go to step down. They are no longer ICU appropriate at this point. So then that was me saying, okay, Corey, calm down,
Calm down. Take that breath.
calm
Go
down,
have some
take
water.
deep breaths. Yes. And then go in and assess because it just may be they're lonely. They need somebody to talk to or
Yeah.
they're uncomfortable, right? And so
Yeah.
it just, going in with a different set of eyes and really having the compassion to find out what's going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That brings me back way, way back earlier on in my career. And I worked in NICU. But I had, at the time, I don't know that I appreciated her as much as I would now. But I did have a manager when I worked in the nuclear. And this was in England. But her thing was, I realize now that she was able really to see when nurses were getting to their wits' end. But her thing was always, go get your blood sugar up. Go get something to bring your blood sugar up.
Yeah, because you were getting hangry at that point, hungry and angry.
She was able to see it and to see past that long before you yourself realized that that was what was happening. And she would, whether it was your break time or not, she would say, okay, stop, go get your blood sugar up.
Yes, yes. And you know what? You bring up a good point, and this is what I learned as a new grad. There were nights where I'm like, I didn't get anything to eat. I'm really
Mhm.
hungry. And then the older veteran nurses were like, get used to it. And then I was confused because I'm like, well, why should I get used to it? Like, I should be able to eat. And why do you guys think this is okay not to eat?
Not to eat.
So, yeah, it just became a culture. And I'm like, this isn't a culture that I want to be a part of. So I started asking like other nurses, hey, I'm gonna go take my 30-minute lunch. Can you listen out? And when I come back,
Mm.
I'll do your patients. You
Your
just tell
percent,
me
yeah.
what. But I asked myself, like, why couldn't this be the culture of covering for each other so
Mhm.
somebody else can go eat? I mean, it was almost like I was asking for a vacation. Oh, this, and so that's when I had to be assertive enough to say, that might work for you, but I need food.
I
And
need
so
to eat.
that's not going to work for me.
Mhm.
No, that's not going to work.
Corey, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so very much for doing that.
I greatly appreciate it.
Any last words you want to leave us with?
Oh, and I know this sounds kind of taboo, but at the end of the day, do what makes you happy. I've worked in a field where I've dealt with patients that were dying, and I tell people I've never heard a patient say, I wish I would have worked more. Take care of yourself, spend time doing the things you love with the people that you love, because there's going to come a day where you may not be able to do those things anymore. So cherish
Yeah,
those things now. Work is always going to be there.
indeed it is. Thank you so very much for that. On that note, thank you, Corey. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.